How does a man become a financial mistake at his own family dinner? They said it like a joke, like a conclusion everyone had already accepted. By the next morning, the man who said it learned how wrong that assumption was. As the story unfolds, take a moment to hit the hype button, subscribe, and write in the comments. Would you forgive him or walk away? The dining room had been set with care. White tablecloth, silver candlesticks. Nadine had arranged everything the way she always did when the family gathered. I sat at the head of the table, same spot I'd occupied for 30 years. But the weight of that position had shifted somewhere along the way. No one said it out loud, but I could feel it in the room. The deference had evaporated. Calvin arrived first, as he always did. My brother-in-law moved through the house like he owned it, loud and confident, shaking hands and clapping shoulders. He wore a tailored suit, perfectly pressed, and his cologne filled the room before he did. Adriana followed behind him, my daughter, quieter now than she used to be. She kissed my cheek without meeting my eyes. "Dad," she said softly. "Adriana." Julian came next with his wife. My son-in-law had the kind of smile that looked practiced, polished for business meetings and client dinners. He nodded at me, formal and distant, then moved to greet Calvin like they were old friends. Maybe they were. I'd stopped keeping track of their alliances. We sat. Nadine brought out the first course. Conversation started easily, flowing around me like water around a stone. Calvin dominated, as usual, talking about a new contract, a supplier issue, some problem at the distribution center. Julian chimed in with numbers and projections. Adriana laughed at something Calvin said. I ate my soup and listened. "Orion, you're quiet tonight," Calvin said, turning to me with that wide grin of his. "Just listening," I said. "That's all you do these days, isn't it?" He laughed, and the table joined him. "Listen and rest. Doctor's orders, right?" I nodded. Something like that. "Well, you've earned it," Calvin continued. "You built something solid. Now you can just sit back and let the rest of us handle the heavy lifting." Julian raised his glass. "To Orion, the man who started it all." They drank. I didn't. The main course came out. Roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread. Nadine had outdone herself, but no one seemed to notice. Calvin kept talking, steering the conversation wherever he wanted it to go. He mentioned a new paving project, something large, something that would require coordination across 3 states. Julian leaned forward, interested. Adriana nodded along. "We're looking at a 6-month timeline," Calvin said. "Maybe 8 if permitting drags. But the margins are strong. Real strong." "How strong?" Julian asked. Calvin threw out a number. Julian whistled. Adriana smiled. I cut into my chicken and said nothing. "Of course," Calvin added. "We'll need full operational control to move fast. Can't have decisions getting bottlenecked by outdated processes." He glanced at me when he said it. Just a flicker, but I caught it. "And efficiency matters," Julian agreed. "Exactly." Calvin took a long drink of wine. "We've been running lean for 2 years now. Streamlined, no unnecessary weight." The phrase hung in the air. Nadine's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Adriana looked down at her plate. Julian shifted in his seat but said nothing. Calvin didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did and didn't care. Dessert came, coffee followed. The conversation drifted to lighter topics. Vacations, holidays, someone's birthday next month. I nodded when spoken to, answered when asked a direct question, but mostly I just watched. Watched how they moved around me. Watched how decisions were discussed without my input. Watched how my own table had become someone else's stage. Calvin stood first, stretching his arms above his head. "Well, that was excellent, Nadine, as always." "Thank you, Calvin." He moved toward the door, then stopped, turned back, smiled at the room. "Before we go, I just want to say something." He picked up his wine glass, still half full. "I want to thank everyone here for making this work, for keeping things moving forward. It's not always easy. Sometimes we inherit situations that are complicated. Sometimes we have to carry things that don't carry themselves anymore." My hand tightened around my coffee cup. "But we do it," Calvin continued. "We do it because we're family, because we understand that even mistakes can be tolerated if we work together." He raised his glass higher. "To the team, to the future, and to Orion." He looked directly at me now. "A financial mistake we all have to tolerate." Laughter. Not loud, but there. Julian covered his mouth, trying to suppress it. Adriana looked away, smiling despite herself. Nadine's face went cold, but she didn't speak. Calvin drank. The others followed. I stayed still, the coffee cup warm in my hands. The toast ended. No one looked at me. They left one by one. Handshakes, hugs, promises to meet again soon. I stayed in my chair until the last car pulled out of the driveway. Nadine began clearing plates, her movement sharp and deliberate. "You're not going to say anything?" she asked. "Not yet." "He called you a mistake, Orion." "I know." She stopped, holding a stack of plates. "And you're just going to let it sit there?" I looked up at her. "For now." She didn't understand. Not yet, but she would. I stood slowly, my knees stiff from sitting too long, and walked to my office. The room was dark. I didn't turn on the light. I sat at my desk and opened the bottom drawer. Inside were files, contracts, documents I hadn't looked at in years because I didn't need to. They were built to last, built to hold. I pulled out the thickest folder and laid it flat on the desk. Even in the dim light from the hallway, I could read the title clearly. Ownership Structure, Delegation of Authority, Conditions and Limitations. I opened it, read the first page, then the second, then the third. Everything was still there. Every clause, every condition, every failsafe I'd built into the framework 30 years ago when I'd started this company from nothing. They thought I'd handed it over. They thought delegation meant transfer. They thought wrong. I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair. A financial mistake. We'd see. The phrase didn't start at that dinner. It had been building for months, maybe longer. I just hadn't been paying attention. Or maybe I had been, and I'd chosen to ignore it. Either way, it was there now, loud and clear, and I couldn't unhear it. It started small. A comment here, a joke there. Little dismissals that seemed harmless on their own but added up over time. The first time I heard something close to it was 6 months ago, at a company barbecue. Calvin had been holding court by the grill, telling stories, making people laugh. I'd been sitting in a lawn chair, my legs propped up, trying to keep my pressure down like the doctor ordered. "Orion's earned his rest," Calvin had said to someone. "Man worked hard. Now he's just coasting to the finish line." People nodded, smiled, agreed. I didn't correct him. The second time was sharper. It was at Adriana's house, a Sunday afternoon, family gathered for no particular reason. Julian had been talking about a new logistics software, something that would cut costs and improve delivery times. He'd been excited, animated, laying out the benefits like a sales pitch. "We should implement it across all branches," he'd said. "Have you run it by Orion?" Nadine had asked. Julian had hesitated. Just a second, but it was there. "Orion doesn't really... he's not involved in day-to-day anymore. But he's still..." "It's fine, Mom," Adriana had interrupted. "Dad trusts us to make these decisions." I'd been in the next room. They hadn't known I was listening. After that, the comments came faster. Little assumptions, little erasures. Calvin started scheduling meetings without me. Julian began signing contracts using company authority I'd delegated, but never surrendered. Adriana stopped asking my opinion on anything business-related. They moved around me like I was furniture, present but irrelevant. The phrase itself, financial mistake, I'd first seen it in writing 2 weeks before the dinner. The family had a group chat, something Adriana had started to keep everyone connected. Mostly it was pictures of grandkids, plans for holidays, reminders about birthdays, but sometimes work crept in. Calvin had sent a message late one night. I'd been lying in bed scrolling through my phone because I couldn't sleep. "Closed the Henderson deal today. $2.3 million over 3 years. Not bad for a company that used to be run by a financial mistake." 3 laughing emojis followed. Julian had replied with a thumbs up. Adriana had sent a congratulations. No one had corrected him. No one had defended me. I'd stared at that message for a long time. Then I'd put the phone down and gone to sleep. The narrative had solidified by then. Orion Wanton, once successful, now obsolete. A founder who'd built something impressive but couldn't keep up with modern demands. A man whose health had failed him, whose energy had run out, whose time had passed. They didn't say it with malice. They said it with pity, with acceptance, with the certainty of people who believed they were simply acknowledging reality. And I'd let them believe it. I'd stepped back 2 years ago when my doctor told me my pressure was dangerously high. Stress, he'd said. Too much responsibility, too many decisions. If I didn't slow down, I'd be looking at a stroke or worse. So I'd slowed down, delegated authority, let others take the lead. It had seemed smart at the time, necessary, but delegation wasn't abdication. I'd been careful about that. Every agreement, every transfer of responsibility had been temporary, conditional, revocable. I'd built the company on solid legal ground, and I'd structured the authority the same way. Calvin and Julian could make decisions, could sign contracts, could run operations, but only because I allowed it. only because the underlying ownership remained exactly where it had always been. They'd forgotten that, or maybe they'd never understood it in the first place. I spent the morning after the dinner in my office. Nadine brought me coffee and left without a word. She knew I was working, even if she didn't know exactly what I was working on. I pulled every document I could find: partnership agreements, board resolutions, delegation letters, financial statements. I laid them out on the desk in chronological order and read through them one by one. The company was still mine. 73% ownership, controlling interest, final authority on all major decisions. Calvin and Julian operated under powers I'd granted them explicitly, powers that could be withdrawn at any time with proper notice. They'd been acting like owners, but they were employees. Trusted employees, maybe? Family, certainly, but not owners. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the group chat again. The message was still there. Financial mistake. I read it 3 times. Then I opened my calendar and circled a date 3 weeks out. There was a quarterly board meeting scheduled, mandatory attendance. I hadn't been to one in over a year, but my name was still on the notice, still listed as chairman. I put the phone down and leaned back in my chair. Let them be certain. Let them think the transition was complete. Let them make plans based on assumptions that were never true. The warehouse was quiet when I drove out there 2 days later. I didn't announce my visit. Didn't call ahead. Just showed up mid-morning and parked near the loading dock. Workers moved between pallets, forklifts hummed, trucks idled near the gates. It was efficient, organized, the kind of operation that ran itself. But when I stepped out of my car, something shifted. A worker near the dock saw me first. He stopped, straightened, then nudged the guy next to him. They both turned. One of them nodded, then another. Within 30 seconds, half the crew had noticed I was there. "Mr. Wanton," someone called out. "Morning." "You need something, sir?" "Just looking around?" They didn't question it, didn't ask why I was there or what I wanted. They just adjusted, the way people do when someone with authority shows up. Even if that authority had been quiet for 2 years, it was still there, still recognized. I walked through the yard slowly, hands in my pockets, taking in the layout. New shelving units near the back, updated safety signage, a repainted office door. They'd made improvements, good ones. I didn't interfere. Calvin's truck pulled in 20 minutes later. He stepped out, saw me, and froze for just a second. Then the smile came back. "Orion, didn't expect to see you here. Thought I'd check in. Everything's running smooth. You can see for yourself." "I can." He walked closer, hands on his hips, trying to look casual. "You should have called. I could have given you a tour." "Didn't need one." "Right." He glanced around, saw the workers watching. "Well, if you want to sit in on a logistics meeting later." "I'm good." "Okay." He nodded, still smiling, but something had shifted in his eyes. Uncertainty. Just a flicker. "Let me know if you need anything." I left without another word. That night, I called Harold Kessler. He answered on the second ring. "Orion, it's been a while." "It has." "What can I do for you?" "I need to confirm something." "Go ahead." "The delegation agreements I signed 2 years ago. They're still conditional, correct?" "Of course. Every provision you built in is still active. Nothing has changed unless you've signed new documents, which I assume you haven't." "I haven't." "Then the structure is exactly as it was. You delegated operational authority, not ownership. You remain majority shareholder and chairman of the board. All decisions made under that delegation are valid only within the scope you defined." "And if they've exceeded that scope?" Harold paused. "Then those decisions can be challenged, possibly reversed, depending on what we're talking about." "I'll know more soon." "Is there something specific I should prepare for?" "A board meeting, 3 weeks." "I'll be ready." I hung up and opened my laptop. The quarterly meeting was 17 days away. I began drafting an agenda of my own, not the one Calvin and Julian would expect, the one they needed to see. The clinic waiting room smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. I sat in a chair near the window, watching cars pull in and out of the parking lot. Nadine sat beside me, flipping through a magazine she wasn't reading. We'd been waiting for 20 minutes. The receptionist had apologized twice already. The doctor was running behind. "You didn't have to come," I said. "I wanted to." "It's just a checkup." "I know." She turned a page without looking at it. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The pressure had been manageable lately. No spikes, no dizziness. The medication was working. But the doctor wanted to monitor it closely, especially given my age. 58 wasn't old, but it wasn't young either, and stress didn't care about age. The door opened. A nurse called my name. We stood and followed her back. The exam was routine, pressure cuff, stethoscope, questions about diet and exercise and sleep. The doctor was younger than me, mid-40s, with the kind of tired eyes that came from long shifts and too many patients. He reviewed my chart, nodded a few times, then looked up. "Numbers are stable," he said. "That's good. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." "No changes?" "Not right now. But I want to be clear stress is still your biggest risk factor. If something comes up, something that raises your pressure, you need to step back. Immediately." "I understand." "Do you?" He set the chart down and leaned forward. "Because last time we talked, you told me you were delegating responsibilities, stepping away from the business. If that's changed..." "It hasn't." "Good." He didn't look convinced. "Because another spike like the one 2 years ago, and we're looking at serious complications. Stroke, heart failure, organ failure. This isn't something you can push through, Orion. Your body won't let you." Nadine's hand found mine. I squeezed it once. "I'm being careful," I said. "Make sure you are." We left the clinic and drove home in silence. Nadine didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer explanations. But I could feel her watching me. Reading the tension I wasn't showing, she'd been married to me for 33 years. She knew when I was planning something. That afternoon, I went to the local cafe. Not the one near home, but the one closer to the office, the place where employees sometimes gathered after work. I ordered coffee and sat in the corner booth, laptop open, pretending to work. But I was listening. 2 younger guys from the sales team sat 3 tables over. I recognized them but didn't know their names. They were talking loud enough that I didn't have to strain. "Calvin's pushing for the expansion," one said. "Wants to open 2 new locations by next quarter. Can we afford that?" "He says we can. Says the old man isn't around to slow things down anymore." "Old man?" "Orion, the founder. You've seen him at events, right? Just sits there, doesn't say much." I thought he still owned the company. "On paper, maybe, but Calvin runs it now, has for a while." They laughed, moved on to other topics. I finished my coffee and left. The assumption was everywhere, not just in my family, not just at dinners and group chats. It had spread through the entire organization. The story of my decline had become accepted fact. Orion Wanton, the man who built the company, had stepped aside. Calvin Moreau, the dynamic brother-in-law, had taken over. That was the narrative. That was what people believed. I drove to an empty parking lot and sat with the engine off. The radio was silent. The afternoon sun slanted through the windshield, warm against my face. I thought about the dinner, about the toast, about the laughter that had followed Calvin's words. A financial mistake we all have to tolerate. I'd tolerated a lot over the past 2 years. Dismissals, erasures, assumptions. I'd watched my authority dissolve in their eyes, not because I'd given it up, but because they'd decided I no longer had it. And I'd let them decide. I'd been quiet, patient, careful. But patience had limits. I started the car and drove home. Nadine was in the kitchen when I walked in. She looked up from the stove, studied my face, then went back to stirring. "You've decided something," she said. "I have." "Are you going to tell me what it is?" "Soon." "Orion." "Soon." She didn't push. She knew better. I went to my office and opened the calendar again. The board meeting was 14 days away. That night Calvin called. I let it ring twice before answering. "Orion, hey, just checking in." "About what?" "About nothing specific. Just wanted to make sure everything's okay. You seemed a little distant at the warehouse the other day." "I was just looking around." "Right, of course." He paused. "Listen, if you ever want to sit in on a planning meeting, you're always welcome. I know you've stepped back, but the door's open." "I appreciate that." "Good, good." Another pause. "How's your health? Everything stable?" "Fine." "That's great. Really great. Because we need you around, you know? Even if you're not in the thick of it anymore, you're still, the founder. The guy who started it all." "I know what I am, Calvin." "Of course. I didn't mean... Is there anything else?" No, that's it. Just wanted to check in." I hung up and stared at the phone. He was worried. Not about me. About what my presence at the warehouse might mean. About whether I was planning to get involved again. About whether the structure he'd built his confidence on was as solid as he thought. It wasn't. I opened my laptop and pulled up the board meeting agenda. It had been emailed 3 days ago, copied to all members. The topics were standard: financial review, operational updates, strategic planning. Nothing unusual. nothing that required my attendance. But I was going anyway. I spent the next week preparing. I didn't tell anyone, didn't announce my intentions, just quietly gathered documents, reviewed financials, and confirmed details with Harold. The legal structure was exactly what I remembered. Ownership hadn't shifted. Authority hadn't transferred. Everything I'd built was still intact. The assumption had been that stepping back meant stepping down, that delegating responsibility meant surrendering control, that my silence was the same as absence. They'd taken my health issues and turned them into a narrative of decline, of obsolescence, of irrelevance. They'd made a mistake. Let them be certain. Let them act like the transition was permanent. Let them make decisions based on authority they thought they had. And then, when they were most confident, most secure, most convinced that the old man at the head of the table was nothing more than a relic, then I'd remind them who still owned the company. I circled the date one more time. Then I closed the calendar and went to bed. 9 days. The workers at the distribution center still called me Mr. Wanton. Not Orion, not buddy or pal or any of the casual familiarity Calvin used with them. They called me Mr. Wanton, and when I walked through the yard, they straightened up. Not because I demanded it, because they remembered. I hadn't been to the center in 8 months. It was further out than the main warehouse, 2 hours west, near the state line. Julian ran it. Had for 3 years now. It was his domain, his project, the thing he pointed to when he wanted to prove he was more than just a son-in-law who'd married into opportunity. And to his credit, he'd done well. Revenue was up, costs were down, efficiency had improved across the board, but efficiency built on someone else's foundation wasn't the same as ownership. I pulled into the lot just before noon. The building was larger than I remembered. They'd expanded the loading docks and added a second office wing. New signage hung above the entrance, clean and professional. It looked like success. It looked like something that belonged to the people running it. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the main entrance. A worker passed me, pulling a pallet jack. He glanced up, did a double take, then stopped. "Mr. Wanton?" "Morning. Didn't know you were coming today." Neither did anyone else. He nodded slowly, uncertain how to respond, then continued on. I pushed through the front door and into the lobby. The receptionist looked up, smiled automatically, then froze. "Mr. Wanton, we weren't expecting... Is Julian here?" "Yes, he's in a meeting. Should I... I'll wait." I sat in one of the chairs near the window. The receptionist picked up her phone, spoke quietly, then hung up. 2 minutes later, Julian appeared, coming down the hallway fast, his expression caught somewhere between surprise and concern. "Orion, what are you doing here?" "Visiting." "You should have called. I could have cleared my schedule." "I'm not here for a meeting." "Then what?" "I'm just looking around." No, he didn't know how to respond to that. He stood there, hands in his pockets, trying to smile. "Well, if you want a tour, I know the layout." "Right, of course." He glanced back toward the hallway. "Listen, I've got a conference call in 10 minutes, but after that..." "Go ahead, I'm fine." He hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, let me know if you need anything." He left. I stayed in the chair, watching people move through the lobby. Employees, contractors, delivery drivers. They all moved with purpose, like they belonged here, like this place had always been theirs. It hadn't. After 20 minutes, I stood and walked deeper into the building. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. They saw me, recognized me, and let me pass. I walked through the warehouse floor, past rows of inventory, past workers operating forklifts and scanners. I climbed the stairs to the second-floor offices and stopped outside the conference room. Through the glass, I could see Julian on a video call, leaning forward, animated, pointing at something on his laptop screen. He looked confident, in control, like someone who'd earned his position through competence, not connection. I kept walking. At the end of the hall was a smaller office. The door was open. Inside, file cabinets lined the walls, and a desk sat covered in paperwork. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The files were organized by year. I pulled the most recent one and flipped through it. Contracts, invoices, purchase orders. Everything looked legitimate, everything looked proper. But buried in the middle was something else. A document I hadn't signed, a lease agreement for additional warehouse space signed 3 months ago, using company authority Julian had been granted, but only for operational decisions, not capital commitments. I set the file down and pulled another, then another. The pattern repeated. Small overreaches. Little assumptions. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to show that the boundaries I'd set had been ignored. Not out of malice, maybe, but out of confidence. The confidence of someone who thought the boundaries no longer mattered. I took photos of 3 documents with my phone. Then I put the files back exactly as I'd found them and left the office. Julian caught up with me in the parking lot. "Orion, wait." I stopped, turned. "Did you find what you were looking for?" he asked. "I did." "And?" "And I'll see you at the board meeting next week." His face shifted. Confusion, then realization. "You're coming to that?" "I am." "But you haven't been to one in over a year." "I know." "Is something wrong?" "We'll discuss it at the meeting." I got in my car and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw Julian standing in the lot, phone already pressed to his ear. The drive home took 2 hours. I used the time to think, to plan, to make sure every detail was in place. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I knew exactly what I needed to do. That night, Harold called. "Calvin reached out," he said. "Wants to know if there's an issue." "What did you tell him?" "That you're the chairman and you have every right to attend board meetings." "Good." "He's nervous, Orion." "He should be." "Are you sure about this? If you're planning to make changes..." "I'm not planning anything. I'm executing something I planned 2 years ago." Harold was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'll be there." "I know." I hung up and opened my email. The board meeting notice was still there, sitting in my inbox, dated 3 weeks ago. Mandatory attendance. I clicked reply and typed a single sentence. "I will be attending. Please ensure all documentation is available for review." I hit send. The response came 6 minutes later, from Calvin. "Looking forward to seeing you there." 3 words that meant nothing, but the speed of the reply told me everything. He was rattled. They all were. I closed the laptop and went to find Nadine. She was in the living room, reading by the fireplace. I sat down beside her. "It's done," I said. "What's done?" "The setup. They know I'm coming. They know something's changed. Now they'll spend the next week trying to figure out what." "And they won't," she said. "No, they won't." She set her book down and looked at me. "Are you sure this is what you want? Once you do this, there's no going back." "I'm sure." "They'll be angry." "I know." "Adriana will?" "I know." She studied my face for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay." "Okay?" "You've been quiet long enough." I leaned back and closed my eyes. The board meeting was 6 days away. The days before the meeting moved slowly. I kept to my routine. Morning coffee, afternoon walks, evening dinners with Nadine. On the surface, nothing had changed. But underneath, I was preparing. Going over documents. Reviewing financial statements, making sure every detail was correct, every clause was clear, every piece of evidence was in place. Calvin called twice more. Both times, I let it go to voicemail. Julian sent a text asking if we could meet before the board meeting. I didn't respond. Adriana called Nadine, asking if I was okay, if something was wrong. Nadine told her I was fine, just busy. The truth was, I wasn't busy. I was ready. I'd been ready for weeks, maybe longer. The board meeting was just the formality, the stage where I'd make public what I'd already decided in private. On the 4th day, I drove back to the main office. Not to the warehouse, not to the distribution center, to the headquarters building where everything had started 30 years ago. The parking lot was half full. I recognized most of the cars. Employees I'd hired, managers I'd promoted, people who'd built their careers on the foundation I'd laid. I walked through the lobby and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The executive offices were quiet. Most people were out in the field or in meetings. I walked past Calvin's office, he wasn't there, and stopped at my old office. The door was locked. A nameplate beside it read storage. I pulled out my keys, the lock still turned. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. They'd converted it into exactly what the nameplate said. Storage, boxes stacked along the walls, old files, outdated equipment, a few pieces of furniture that didn't fit anywhere else. My desk was gone, my chair, the bookshelves that had held 30 years of reference materials. I stood in the center of the room and looked around. This was what they thought of me now. Storage. Something to be packed away and forgotten. I pulled out my phone and took a picture. Then I left, locked the door, and walked back to the elevator. When I got home, Nadine was in the garden. I found her pruning roses, her hands careful and precise. "How was the office?" she asked without looking up. "Illuminating." "Find what you needed?" "I did." She set down the pruning shears and turned to face me. "You're not angry." "No." "You should be." "Maybe, but anger doesn't help. Clarity does." And you have clarity? I do. She nodded, picked up the shears again. Then finish what you started. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through the sequence of events one more time. Every step, every response, every possible outcome. I'd prepared for this. I knew what I was going to say. I knew what they would say. I knew how it would end. But knowing didn't make it easier. At 2 a.m, I got up and went to the kitchen, made tea, sat at the table in the dark. Nadine appeared in the doorway a few minutes later. Can't sleep? She asked. No. She sat down across from me. Second thoughts? No. Then what? I looked at her. They're my family. They are. Adriana is my daughter. She is. And You're about to remind them who you are, Nadine said. Who you've always been. They forgot Orion. Or they chose to forget. Either way, they need to remember. And if they don't forgive me, then they don't, but at least they'll know the truth. I drank my tea. She was right. She was always right. Get some sleep, she said. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. I nodded, but I didn't go back to bed. I sat at the table until the sun came up. The morning of the meeting, I woke before dawn. Nadine was still asleep beside me, her breathing steady and calm. I lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling, running through the sequence of events one more time. I'd prepared for this. Every detail, every document, every possible response. There was no uncertainty left, only execution. I got up quietly and went to the kitchen, made coffee, stood at the window and watched the sky lighten. The neighborhood was silent. No cars, no movement, just the slow transition from night to morning. Nadine appeared in the doorway 20 minutes later, wrapped in a robe. You're ready, she said, not a question. I am. Do you need anything? No. She poured herself coffee and sat at the table. What time is the meeting? 10. And you're sure Harold has everything? He does. She nodded, sipped her coffee, didn't ask anything else. I went upstairs and dressed. Nothing flashy, just a suit I'd worn 1,000 times before. Simple, professional. The kind of thing a man wears when he doesn't need to prove anything. I checked my reflection in the mirror, straightened my tie, then grabbed the folder I'd prepared the night before. Nadine was waiting by the door when I came back down. You'll call me after? She asked. I will. Good. She kissed my cheek. Go remind them who you are. I drove to the office in silence. No radio, no distractions. Just the road and the low hum of the engine. The building appeared through the trees, 3 stories of brick and glass, surrounded by landscaped grounds. I'd built this place from nothing. 30 years ago, it had been an empty lot. Now it was the headquarters of a company worth $40 million. I parked in my old spot, the one with my name on it. Someone had removed the sign 2 years ago, replaced it with visitor parking. I didn't care. Inside, the lobby was quiet. The receptionist glanced up, then stood quickly. Mr. Wanton, good morning. Morning. They're waiting for you in the boardroom. I know. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The doors opened onto a hallway lined with framed photos. Company milestones, project completions, awards. My face appeared in a few of the older ones, standing beside workers, shaking hands, cutting ribbons. In the recent photos, I was absent. The boardroom was at the end of the hall. Double doors, polished wood, a brass plaque that read, Executive Conference Room. I could hear voices inside. Laughter, casual conversation, the sound of people who felt comfortable, safe. I pushed through without knocking. They were all there. Calvin, Julian, Adriana, 3 other board members I'd appointed years ago. Harold sat at the far end, his briefcase open, documents spread in front of him. Everyone looked up when I entered. Calvin stood first, smiling. Orion. Glad you could make it. I wouldn't miss it. Julian nodded from across the table. Adriana didn't look at me. The other board members shifted uncomfortably. I took the seat at the head of the table. My seat. No one objected. Let's get started, I said. Calvin cleared his throat. Right. So, we have a few items on the agenda. Financial review, operational updates, and some strategic planning for the next quarter. Harold, do you want to start with... Actually, I said, I'd like to address something first. The room went still. Calvin's smile tightened. Of course. What's on your mind? I opened the folder in front of me and pulled out the first document, slid it across the table. This is the delegation agreement I signed 2 years ago. It grants operational authority to Calvin Moreau and Julian Morel, allowing them to make day-to-day decisions without my direct involvement. It was designed to reduce my workload during a period of medical concern. Calvin glanced at the document, then back at me. Right, we're all familiar with it. Good. Then you're also familiar with the conditions outlined in Section 4. Silence. What conditions? Julian asked. I pulled out a second document. The ones that specify the scope of delegated authority, operational decisions, personnel management, contract execution up to $500,000, but not capital commitments, not structural changes, and not transfers of ownership. Calvin leaned back in his chair. No one said anything about ownership, didn't they? I looked at him. Because for the past 2 years, you've been acting like this company belongs to you, making decisions that exceed your authority, signing leases without approval, restructuring divisions without consultation. I pulled out my phone and opened the group chat, read the message aloud. Closed the Henderson deal today, $2.3 million over 3 years. Not bad for a company that used to be run by a financial mistake. I set the phone down. And then, at a family dinner, in front of everyone, you raised your glass and called me exactly that, a financial mistake. Something to be tolerated. Calvin's face went red. That was a joke. Was it? Orion, come on. You've been out of the picture for 2 years? We've been running things. Successfully. You can't just... I can. I pulled out the photos I'd taken at the distribution center, slid them across the table. Because these are lease agreements Julian signed 3 months ago. Capital commitments, beyond his authority, using company resources without proper authorization. Julian's face went pale. Those were necessary for expansion. You weren't available to consult. I was available. You chose not to consult me. You assumed I no longer mattered. I pulled out another document, the ownership structure. This is the current ownership breakdown. 73% Orion Wanton, 15% distributed among other shareholders, 12% in company reserves. Calvin Moreau owns 0%. Julian Morel owns 0%. The room was silent. You've been operating under delegated authority, I continued. Authority I granted. Authority that was conditional. Authority that could be revoked at any time. You're not seriously? Calvin started. I am. I slid the final document across the table. This is a formal notice of authority revocation, effective immediately. All operational powers previously delegated to Calvin Moreau and Julian Morel are hereby rescinded. All financial access is suspended pending review. All contracts signed beyond the scope of delegated authority are under investigation. Calvin stood. You can't do this. I already have. We'll fight it. On what grounds? You have no legal claim. You have no ownership stake. You've been operating under permissions I gave you, permissions that no longer exist. Julian stood now too. This is insane. We've built this company up. We've increased revenue by 30%. We've expanded operations across 4 states. And you want to just... I built this company, I said, my voice calm. 30 years ago, from nothing. You've managed it. You've improved it. But you've never owned it. And you made the mistake of thinking management was the same as ownership. Adriana spoke for the first time. Dad, please. Not now, Adriana. But not now. Harold cleared his throat. For the record, I've reviewed all documentation. Mr. Wanton's actions are fully within his legal rights. The company structure has not changed. Ownership has not changed. What has changed is the delegation of authority, which was always conditional and revocable. Calvin slammed his hand on the table. This is revenge. That's what this is. You're angry about one stupid comment. I'm not angry, I said. I'm correcting a mistake. The mistake of thinking that silence meant surrender. The mistake of assuming that stepping back meant stepping down. Your mistake. I stood, looked at each of them in turn. Calvin, red-faced and furious. Julian, pale and shaken. Adriana, tears in her eyes. The other board members, silent and uncomfortable. This meeting is adjourned, I said. Calvin, Julian, you're both suspended pending further review. All access to company systems, finances, and operations is terminated immediately. Security will escort you from the building. You'll receive formal termination notices within 48 hours. Termination? Calvin's voice cracked. You're firing us? I'm removing employees who exceeded their authority and damaged company trust. Yes. We're family. You called me a financial mistake at my own dinner table. You laughed. You made it clear what you thought of me. Now you know what I think of assumptions built on lies. I picked up my folder and walked toward the door. Calvin moved to block me. You'll regret this, he said. I looked at him, really looked at him, saw the anger, the desperation, The sudden realization that everything he'd built his confidence on was crumbling. "No," I said. "I won't." I walked past him and out the door. The hallway felt longer on the way out. My footsteps echoed against the polished floor. Behind me, I could hear raised voices from the boardroom. Calvin shouting, Julian trying to reason, Harold's calm voice cutting through both of them, explaining legalities they didn't want to hear. I kept walking. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the ground floor. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of Calvin storming out of the boardroom, his face twisted with rage. Then the doors shut, and he was gone. The lobby was busy now, mid-morning, employees moving between offices, phone calls, meetings, the normal rhythm of a working day. No one knew yet what had just happened upstairs. No one knew that the structure they'd been operating under for 2 years had just collapsed. They'd find out soon enough. I walked to my car and sat behind the wheel. Pulled out my phone. 3 missed calls already. 2 from Adriana. 1 from someone I didn't recognize. I put the phone away and started the engine. The drive home was a blur. I barely remember the roads, the turns, the traffic lights. My mind was elsewhere, replaying the meeting. Calvin's face when he realized what was happening, Julian's panic, Adriana's tears. I pushed the images away and focused on the road. Nadine was waiting on the porch when I pulled into the driveway. She stood as I got out of the car, searching my face. "It's done?" she asked. "It's done. How do you feel?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "Lighter," she nodded. "Good." We went inside. She made lunch. We ate in silence. My phone kept buzzing. Texts, calls, voicemails piling up. I turned it off and set it on the counter. "You should answer eventually," Nadine said. "I will, just not today." "Adriana called me." "I figured." "She's upset?" "I know." "Are you going to talk to her?" "When she's ready to listen, not before." Nadine nodded and cleared the plates. I went to my office and sat at the desk. The folder from the meeting was still in my briefcase. I pulled it out and set it aside. Then I opened my laptop and logged into the company system. My access was still active. I pulled up the financial dashboards, revenue reports, expense tracking, profit margins, everything Calvin and Julian had been managing for the past 2 years. The numbers were good, better than good. They'd done solid work, built on what I'd created and improved it in meaningful ways, but they'd also made assumptions, taken liberties, exceeded their authority in small ways that had added up over time. I spent the next hour documenting everything, every contract that needed review, every decision that had been made outside the scope of delegated authority, every financial commitment that should have required board approval but hadn't received it. The list was longer than I'd expected. By mid-afternoon, Harold called. Security escorted them out, he said. Calvin made a scene. Julian tried to negotiate. Neither got anywhere. Good. The other board members are confused. They want to schedule an emergency meeting. Tell them we'll meet next week. I'll send an agenda. What's the agenda? Transition. I'm taking back operational control temporarily. We'll hire new management within 60 days. You're not keeping them on? No. Harold sighed. This is going to get messy, Orion. It already is. Calvin's talking about lawyers. Let him talk. He has no case. He might try to make this public, turn it into a family issue. Then he'll look like exactly what he is, someone who overreached and got caught. And Adriana? I paused. That's not business. That's personal. I'll handle it separately. All right. I'll draft the termination notices and have them delivered tomorrow. Thank you, Harold. I hung up and stared at the laptop screen. The company dashboard, 30 years of work, 30 years of building something from nothing, and for 2 years I'd watched others take credit for it, watched them erase me, watched them laugh at the idea that I still mattered. They knew now. My phone buzzed. I turned it back on. A text from Adriana. Dad, please call me. We need to talk. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I set the phone down without responding. Not yet. That evening, Nadine and I sat on the back porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. She had a glass of wine. I had water. Do you think they'll forgive you? She asked. Eventually? Maybe. Right now? No. Does that bother you? I thought about it. Less than I expected. Because you're right? Because I'm done being invisible. She smiled. You were never invisible, Orion. They just stopped looking. Same thing. No, it's not. We sat in silence as the sun dipped below the horizon. My phone buzzed again and again. I ignored it. Tomorrow I'd start rebuilding. I'd take back control. I'd remind everyone, employees, clients, competitors, that Orion Wanton wasn't finished, wasn't obsolete, wasn't a mistake to be tolerated. But tonight, I just sat with my wife and watched the sky turn dark. It was enough. The next morning, I arrived at the office before 7. The parking lot was empty except for a few cars belonging to early shift workers. I parked in my old spot, the visitor designation be damned, and walked through the lobby. The receptionist wasn't there yet. The hallways were quiet. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor and walked to my old office, the one they'd turned into storage. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Spent 5 minutes moving boxes into the hallway. Then I called facilities. "This is Orion Wanton. I need my old office cleared and restored. Today." "Mr. Wanton, I will need to check with me. I own the company. Clear the office." "Yes, sir." I hung up and walked to Calvin's old office. His desk was still covered with papers. His computer was logged in. I shut it down, gathered the papers into a box, and carried it to Harold's office down the hall. Harold arrived 20 minutes later. "You're here early," he said. "We have work to do." He set his briefcase down and looked at the box. "Calvin's things?" "Yes. I'll have them shipped to him." "Orion, about yesterday." "What about it?" "The other board members are concerned. They want assurances that the company won't suffer from this transition." "It won't. They'd like to hear that directly from you." "Schedule a meeting for tomorrow. I'll address their concerns." Harold nodded. "And the management positions?" Calvin and Julian left significant gaps. "I'll fill them. Promote from within where possible. Hire externally if needed. I built this company once. I can stabilize it now." "You're taking on a lot, Orion. Your health is fine. The doctor cleared me, and this isn't stress. This is correction." He studied me for a moment. "You're different." "How?" "Focused. More than I've seen you in years." "I remember who I am now." Harold smiled slightly. "Good, because we have a lot to do." We spent the morning reviewing contracts. Every agreement Calvin and Julian had signed, every commitment they'd made, most were legitimate, well negotiated, properly executed within their delegated authority, but a few crossed lines. Lease agreements for expansion space, equipment purchases above their spending limits, a consulting contract with a firm I'd never heard of. "This one," I said, pointing to the consulting contract. "Who authorized this?" Harold pulled out his copy. Read through it. "Calvin signed it 6 months ago. Says it was for strategic planning assistance." "Did we need strategic planning assistance?" Apparently he thought so. "Who's the firm?" "Moreau Consulting Group." I looked up. "That's his brother's company." "Yes. So he hired his own brother, using company funds, without board approval. Technically, he had authority to engage consultants up to a certain amount." "How much?" Harold checked. $200,000 over 12 months. "And how much did we pay them?" $350,000. I set the contract down. Add it to the list of violations. By noon, we had a clear picture. Most of Calvin and Julian's work had been solid, but they'd also taken liberties, made assumptions, operated as if the company were theirs to do with, as they pleased, small things individually. But together, they painted a picture of people who'd forgotten they were employees. The board meeting was scheduled for the next morning. I spent the afternoon preparing, drafted an operational plan, identified interim management, created a timeline for permanent hires. By the time I left the office, I had a complete strategy. Nadine was in the kitchen when I got home. "How was it?" she asked. "Productive." "Did you talk to Adriana?" "No. Orion. She'll call when she's ready." Nadine set down the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables. "She called me 3 times today. She's devastated. She chose her side. She chose her husband, who spent 2 years undermining me. And she's your daughter." I looked at her. "I know that, but I'm not apologizing for protecting what I built." "I'm not asking you to apologize. I'm asking you to talk to her." "I will, when she's ready to hear what I have to say." Nadine studied me for a long moment. Then she went back to chopping. "You're more stubborn than I remember." "I've had to be." That night, I finally listened to the voicemails. There were 17, most from Adriana, a few from board members, one from a reporter asking for comment on family business disputes. I deleted that one immediately. Adriana's messages progressed from confused to angry to heartbroken. In the last one, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Dad, I don't understand. You fired my husband. You humiliated him in front of everyone. And you won't even talk to me. I need to understand why. Please." I saved the message. Then I turned off my phone and went to bed. Tomorrow would be busy. The board meeting started at 9. All 6 members were present. Harold sat to my right, a stack of documents in front of him. The others, 2 men and a woman I'd known for years, sat across from me, their faces carefully neutral. "Thank you for coming on short notice," I said. "I know yesterday was unexpected. I want to address your concerns and outline our path forward." The woman, Patricia, spoke first. "Orion, we respect your position as chairman and majority owner, but Calvin and Julian were integral to our operations. Removing them so abruptly creates instability. Temporary instability," I said, "which is preferable to ongoing mismanagement." "Mismanagement?" one of the men, Kellen, asked. "Our revenue is up 30% over 2 years. We've expanded into new markets. By most metrics, we're succeeding." "We are," I agreed. "But success doesn't excuse overreach. Calvin and Julian made decisions outside their delegated authority. They signed contracts without proper approval. They operated as if ownership had transferred when it hadn't." I slid copies of the problematic contracts across the table. "These are examples: lease agreements, capital purchases, a consulting contract with Calvin's brother's firm. All exceeded their authority." Patricia reviewed the documents. "These are concerning, but couldn't they have been addressed through internal review rather than termination?" "They could have been, if this were just about procedure, but it's not." I pulled out my phone and opened the group chat. "This is a message Calvin sent 2 weeks before I revoked his authority. He called me a financial mistake. He made it clear he believed I was irrelevant. That wasn't a procedural issue. That was a fundamental misunderstanding of who owns this company." The room was quiet. "I delegated authority 2 years ago for health reasons," I continued. "That delegation was conditional, temporary. Calvin and Julian treated it as permanent. They built a narrative that I was obsolete, that I'd stepped down, that they were now in charge. That narrative was false, and when they acted on it, they exceeded their authority." Kellen leaned back. "So this is about respect. This is about reality. I own 73% of this company. I am the chairman. I never surrendered control. I delegated responsibilities. There's a difference." "And now?" Patricia asked. "Now I'm taking back direct operational control, temporarily. We'll hire new management within 60 days. In the meantime, I'll oversee day-to-day operations with Harold's assistance." "Can you handle that, given your health?" "My health is stable. My doctor has cleared me, and this isn't stress, this is correction." The third board member, Corbin, finally spoke. "What about your daughter? How does Adriana fit into this?" "Adriana is not involved in day-to-day operations. She remains on the board. Nothing about her position has changed." "But her husband?" "Her husband exceeded his authority and damaged company trust. He was terminated for cause. Adriana's relationship with him doesn't change that." Corbin nodded slowly. "I see." "Are there other concerns?" I asked. Patricia spoke. "Just one. What assurances can you give us that this won't happen again? That you won't delegate authority and then revoke it arbitrarily?" "What happened wasn't arbitrary. It was response to documented overreach. But to answer your question, I'm implementing new oversight protocols. All major decisions will require board approval. Monthly financial reviews, quarterly audits, the kind of structure that should have been in place from the beginning." "That's reasonable," Kellen said. "Good. Then if there are no other questions, I'd like to move to operational planning." We spent the next hour reviewing the transition plan, identifying interim managers, setting timelines, addressing client concerns. By the time we adjourned, everyone seemed satisfied. Not happy, perhaps, but satisfied. As they filed out, Patricia stopped by my chair. "Orion, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Was it worth it? Burning those bridges?" I thought about it. "They burned first. I just stopped pretending they hadn't." She nodded and left. Harold waited until we were alone. That went better than I expected. "They're pragmatists. They care about the company, not the drama. Still, you handled it well. Thank you. What now?" "Now I rebuild." I spent the rest of the day meeting with department heads, explaining the transition, answering questions, reassuring people that their jobs were safe, that operations would continue normally, that this was about leadership, not fundamental change. Most seemed relieved. A few were skeptical. One manager asked outright, "Are you back for good, or is this temporary?" "I'm back until I'm confident the company is stable and properly managed," I said. "How long that takes depends on how quickly we can implement necessary changes." Fair enough. By the end of the day, I was exhausted, but it was a different kind of exhaustion than I'd felt in years. Not the draining fatigue of being dismissed, the satisfying tiredness of productive work. I drove home as the sun set. Nadine was waiting on the porch again. "How was it?" she asked. "Better." "The board accepted your plan?" "They did." "And the employees?" "Most are on board. A few need convincing, but we'll get there." She smiled. "I'm proud of you." "For what?" "For remembering who you are." I sat beside her. We watched the sky fade from orange to purple to black. My phone was off. The office was behind me. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, I was exactly where I needed to be. Nadine reached over and took my hand. "Adriana called again," she said quietly. "I know." "You should talk to her." "I will." "When?" "Soon." She squeezed my hand. "Don't wait too long. She's hurting." "So am I." "I know, but you're her father." I nodded. She was right. She was always right. "Tomorrow," I said. "I'll call her tomorrow." I didn't sleep well that night. I kept replaying the confrontation. Calvin's face, Julian's panic, Adriana's tears, the way they'd looked at me like I'd betrayed them, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I called Adriana at 7. She answered on the first ring. "Dad, can we meet?" Silence. Then, "When?" "This morning, just you and me." "Where?" "The cafe downtown, the one near your old school." "I'll be there in an hour." I arrived early, ordered coffee, sat in the corner booth where we'd sat dozens of times when she was younger, back when things were simpler, back before Calvin and Julian, and the weight of family expectations had complicated everything. She walked in 10 minutes late. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying. "Hi, Dad." "Adriana." She sat across from me, didn't order anything, just folded her hands on the table and looked at me. "I don't understand," she said. "Why you did what you did. Why you fired Julian. Why you humiliated Calvin in front of everyone. Why you won't talk to me." "I fired Julian because he exceeded his authority. I revoked Calvin's power for the same reason. And I haven't been avoiding you. I've been waiting for you to be ready to hear what I have to say." "I'm ready now." I took a breath. "For 2 years, I've watched you all treat me like I don't matter, like I'm obsolete, like the company I built from nothing is somehow no longer mine. Calvin called me a financial mistake at my own dinner table. You laughed. I didn't. You smiled. You looked away. You didn't defend me. None of you did." Her eyes filled with tears. "It was a joke, Dad. It wasn't. Not to him, and not to me. But you fired my husband. I fired an employee who overstepped his authority and made decisions he wasn't authorized to make. The fact that he's your husband doesn't change that. He was trying to help, to grow the company. He was trying to take control. There's a difference." She wiped her eyes. "So what now? You just erase him? Erase Calvin? Pretend the last 2 years didn't happen?" "No. I acknowledge what they accomplished. They did good work, but they also made assumptions, treated delegation like ownership. And when I tried to correct that, they fought me. So yes, I removed them, and I'd do it again." Adriana stood. "Then I don't know if I can forgive you." "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for understanding." "Understanding of what? That you value control more than family? That I value truth more than comfortable lies?" She stared at me, then she turned and walked out. I sat there for a long time, finished my coffee, stared at the empty seat across from me. Maybe she'd come around, maybe she wouldn't. Either way, I'd said what needed to be said. I paid the check and drove to the office. The building felt different now, lighter, like a weight had been lifted. I walked through the hallways and people nodded, greeted me by name, treated me like I mattered again. In my office, my real office, now cleared of storage, I sat at the new desk and opened my laptop, pulled up the company dashboard. Revenue was still strong, operations were running smoothly, the transition was working. Harold knocked and stepped inside. Morning. How'd it go with Adriana?" "She's angry." "Give her time." "I plan to." He sat down. "We have the interim management in place. Department heads are briefed. Clients have been notified of the transition. No major pushback so far." "Good." "Calvin hired a lawyer. He's threatening legal action." "Let him. He has no case." "He's also talking to the press, trying to frame this as a family dispute." "Is he?" "Some local business reporter called me yesterday. Wanted a statement." "What did you tell them?" "No comment. But they'll probably run something anyway." I leaned back. "Let them. The truth is on our side. Calvin and Julian exceeded their authority. I corrected it. That's not a dispute. That's business. Harold nodded. Fair enough. Over the next week, I rebuilt, promoted 3 managers to fill the gaps left by Calvin and Julian, implemented new oversight protocols, met with key clients personally to reassure them, worked 14-hour days until everything was stable. The local paper ran a story. Family business dispute leads to management shakeup. It was mostly accurate. Quoted unnamed sources saying I'd fired my son-in-law and brother-in-law without warning. Mentioned my health issues and suggested I might not be up to the task of running the company anymore. I ignored it. 2 weeks after the board meeting, revenue reports came in. Up another 3%, new contracts signed, operations running smoothly. The transition was complete. I called a final board meeting to present the results. Patricia, Kellen, and Corbin listened as I walked through the numbers, showed them the stability metrics, explained the new management structure. You've done well, Patricia said when I finished. The company is in good shape. Thank you. What's next? Kellen asked. We hire permanent management. I step back to chairman role. Continue oversight, but let the new team handle operations. When? Within 30 days. Harold's already vetting candidates. Corbin nodded. That's acceptable. The meeting adjourned. Harold walked me back to my office. You did it, he said. We did. No, you. You took back control, fixed what was broken, and you did it without destroying the company. That was always the goal. Still, well done. I sat at my desk and looked out the window. The sun was setting, the parking lot was emptying. Another day done. My phone buzzed. A text from Nadine. Coming home? Yes, be there soon. I gathered my things, locked the office, walked through the empty hallways to the elevator. In the lobby, a security guard nodded. Good night, Mr. Wanton. Good night. I stepped outside. The air was cool, the sky was clear. I got in my car and drove home. Nadine was in the kitchen when I walked in. How was your day? She asked. Good, really good. The board meeting went well? It did. They approved the plan. We're moving forward. She smiled. I'm glad. We ate dinner together, talked about small things, the garden, the neighbors, a book she was reading, normal things, peaceful things. After dinner, I went to my office and opened the bottom drawer. The folder was still there, the one I'd pulled out the night of the dinner, the one that had started everything. I pulled it out and flipped through it one last time, read the clauses, the conditions, the structure I'd built 30 years ago. It had held. I closed the folder and put it back. Then I locked the drawer and walked upstairs. Nadine was in bed, reading. Everything okay? She asked. Everything's fine. You sure? I'm sure. She set her book aside. You did the right thing, Orion, even if it was hard. I know. And Adriana will come around. Eventually. Maybe. She will. She's your daughter. She loves you. I nodded, got into bed beside her, turned off the light. In the darkness, I thought about everything that had happened. The dinner, the toast, the laughter, the assumptions, the erasure, and then the correction. The meeting, the confrontation, the rebuilding. It had been worth it. I closed my eyes and slept better than I had in years.